The next tool I want to show you is the type tool. So if you're doing graphics, sometimes you want to put type in your graphics. It is the very large T located right above the shape tool. If you click on it, you'll notice that your cursor changes to an actual cursor that you see in Word. And there's two ways you can go about this. You can click to start a line of text. And it is a multi-line text tool, so I can create lots of lines. Or I'm going to click on the black arrow and click off. Click the type tool. I can draw a text box, and my text will only fit inside there. Now it's really weird that Illustrator decides to fill in all text as though it's like some kind of weird elvish Dothraki kind of looking language. Don't worry about it. It's just there to fill so that you can see the size of what the text is going to be as well as the font of the text is going to be. So if I type something and I want to manipulate like what this text is doing, I can highlight the text first and then come up to the options bar. And it's pretty cool. It previews everything. I have a lot of fancy fonts because I download a lot of fonts because I work with it a lot. But you can preview what it's going to look like before you actually decide. So let's see, what's a good font to use? Well, let me use Curls. This is going to be a really good one. And then I'm going to change the size. So with the text still highlighted, I'm going to make it bigger. Text. Graphic design rule number 1. Don't use foofy text. At least not in my class. It doesn't get you very far. It's kind of ridiculous looking. You only use it when, like, maybe I'm a kindergarten teacher or I'm writing a love letter to my significant other. But in terms of interior design projects, if I ever saw font like this on an interior design project, it would probably be an automatic F because I detest it that much. So be careful what kind of fonts you are using on your projects. So if you try to manipulate the text without highlighting it, you'll see very quickly that you actually don't do anything. So Illustrator is kind of a 2-year-old. You have to say, Illustrator, I want to work with these words. Let's make them a smaller font now. Thank you. You can also type in the size that you want up here at the top. So if I wanted 100 size font, there's 100 size font. Now you'll notice that I had a text box and it actually cut off the words. So anytime you see this little red box, it indicates that there's actually more text to be found. You just need to drag your text box out so that you can find it. And as soon as all the text is showing, that little red box goes away. How we doing so far? Are we doing okay? Awesome. So there's a lot of other text tools that you can use. I really like the type on a path tool, but what you have to do first, I'm going to go back to regular type, is you have to actually give it a path to work with. So right next to the type is the line segment tool, and that's basically creating a line. So you click and drag. I know so many design software that I have to check myself before I wreck myself. You know what I'm saying? Alright, so right now, if I look up here, there is absolutely no color involved with this line, so I'm just going to give it a little bit of a black color just so that we can see. You don't have to have a color. If you know where your line is, that's fine. But then when I use the type on a path tool, you'll kind of notice the cursor has a little swirly line with it. Click at the beginning and there it will align the text to your little line right there. It works for arcs too, so if I hold under the line, there's an arc tool. Oops, if you click, it's going to bring up this and it's going to have you, how long do you want it, all that kind of stuff. When I'm drawing arcs and lines, I don't want to give it any kind of I just want to freehand it. So I'm gonna hit cancel, and I'm just gonna click and drag, and you'll kind of see how text tool comes out. Use the white arrow and click on the grips to get those arms so that you can actually get the curve to do what you want. So if I want something like that, and then I want to type on that, I just click and look at how it forms to that shape. You know, if you're making a logo and you have a circle, you can actually put words all the way around the circle, on arcs, on any kind of angle or any kind of line that you can think of. You can actually align text to that line using the type on a path tool. So wow, you kind of got two tools at the same time there. There's a spiral tool. Oh, I love the spiral tool. And what you do is you just kind of, and it makes a snail shell of sorts, and you can give it a stroke, and I can't really see it that well, so I'm going to make it kind of bigger. There we go. I've got a brown snail shell. If I want to change the look of it, again, it's similar to the other shapes. You just click and that little box shows up. And like if I want a 7-segment spiral instead of a 10-segment, and maybe I want the decay to be 50% instead of 80%, click OK. And you can see, like, so each segment is that area between grips, and it'll change the shape of your spirals. So you can do a lot with this. But for now, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to erase everything. And I'm going to show you some tips and tricks of the trade. Let's draw 2 rectangles. So I'm going to come back over here, and then I'm going to change colors. Oops, and I meant that to be black, so that's okay. I just made that one blue, and then I'll change it to black before I start drawing the rectangle. That way the next rectangle I draw stays black. Now let's say that I want this rectangle to be the color of this rectangle. Yes, I could come over here and I could choose this, but the easier thing is to use the eyedrop tool, which is located right here. If I click while this one is highlighted, I just click inside and it kind of sucks up the color and puts it right into that one. So again, I'm going to Control Z to undo. I'm going to use the eyedropper tool, click inside the square. Well, first you have to highlight the square that you want to soak in the color, and then you have to tell Illustrator what color you want to soak in, and there it soaks it in. The other way that you can go about changing colors, let me highlight that again. Double click on this one right here, and it brings up the official Illustrator color picker. Now, as interior designers, we work with paint, and we work with fabrics and all kinds of color. There's Pantone color swatches that we can do. But for instance, if we wanted to use a Sherwin-Williams paint color, if you go to their website, they have these little color formulas associated with each one of their paints. And you can actually take that formula and input it here. And so I could come in here and I could do 35, 35, 42. Maybe that's pumpernickel rye bread paint color. I don't know. I really want to have a job where I name paint colors because I think that's pretty cool. And so it gives me this kind of weird bluish grayish color. And then I click OK and it changes that to here. So again, let me open up that little box. You can go all the way from 0 to 255. 000 is black. 255, 255, 255 is pure white. And any color combination in between is what works for you. Cmyk is also another formula. So is this one. And this one I do believe is the Pantone color number, that if you change it and then you get your Pantone colors, it'll update correctly. You can also come over here and kind of choose like what you want it to look like and click OK, and there it kind of goes. And then the same thing for the border. If you just double click on it, notice it brings it forward right here. And then you can also choose like what the border color you want. So let's do a really dark blue, and let's make it really big so that we can see it. So there it is. Pan hand right here will allow you to kind of manipulate around on the board. If you feel like you need to zoom in or zoom out, my favorite method is Control plus and Control minus on the keyboard. That's the best way you can zoom in. Otherwise, there is this little magnifying glass tool that also allows you to, depending on how you Either use your mouse and pull in or pull out. Brush tool is another tool that you can use, and that's a free form line, so wherever my mouse goes is where this goes as well. Now what's cool about this is that there's actually a brush library. So if we go up to Window and we'd find brushes, there's like this little library that you can look at, and I'm actually going to drag mine to be a little bit longer. So maybe I want it to have like this really cool effect to it, and let me get it a bigger size so that you can actually see what it's doing. Whoa, that's really big. Let's calm that down a little. What the heck? There we go. So that's kind of cool. But if you want to have more options than what they kind of default to, come down here to this little button. It looks like a bunch of book stacks. That's called the brush library menu. And you can come in here and you can look at all the different types of brushes they have. So let's look at decorative and let's look at scatter. So here you're kind of like, what the heck is this all about? Like, really, lady? What's all of this? So I'm gonna choose. What should we choose? Let's choose this sun looking star thing. So if I manipulate my brush, ooh, it puts a whole bunch of stars in there. La la. If I go smaller, what does it do? Tiny stars. And if I put larger, big stars. Definitely a fun tool is the brush tool, and even more fun is to play with all of the different brushes that they have. So here we go. I'm now going with this particular border and creating a line free-formed that has that. Wow, my canvas is a serious hot mess right now. But that's brush tool and all the fun brushes that you get to play with. Let's see. That's pretty much everything that I wanted to show you in terms of tools. The last area that I want to show you would be the transformation of these objects. So it's kind of like how to modify objects, different from what the black and white arrows will do. So I'm going to close this, and I'm going to close this. I'm going to grab the black arrow, and I'm going to highlight all this junk on my page, and I'm going to delete. Sometimes it takes a minute for it to delete. And now I have a nice blank canvas again. Now what I want to do is I want to show you how to manipulate some of these objects other than what the black and white arrows are telling you to do. So I'm going to grab a rectangle. La la la. I'm going to use the white arrow. La la la. Click on and click off. Well, we're good. I'm going to do something like this and something like this. I'm going to make it kind of an unusual shape. And I'm going to switch back to the black arrow just to kind of set up everything correct. It's just a habit of mine. I don't think you really necessarily need to go to the black arrow, but I like to go to the black arrow. It kind of just resets everything after I've done a command. And I'm going to click on the object first because I have to tell Illustrator what object am I trying to transform. Go up to Object in the menu bar, choose Transform, and then let's look at Reflect. Oh, so you can see like it already kind of rearranged it. But this little box pops up, very similar box to everything that you've been seeing. It just allows you to decide, do I want to flip it horizontal or vertical? You can even choose to do it at an angle. So if I did a 45, what would that look like? There we go. It flipped it a 45-degree angle. So that one's a really fun one. If you need to create like two shapes, I'm going to Control C and Control V to get two shapes to pop up, and then I can come up and do Object, Transform, Reflect, and I'm actually going to take it back to 0 on this angle, and I'm going to come back to Object, Transform, Reflect, and I'm going to do vertical and horizontal. Sometimes you have to like sit there and do it a couple times because it just doesn't do what you want it to do. There we go. Click OK, and now I have basically mirroring sides of this shape, and I can do some fun stuff with that. If I feel the need to rotate one of the shapes, I use the black arrow, I click on the shape, and I hover my mouse in the corner a little bit so that you can rotate, and it's always going to rotate based on that center of the shape. So this little blue grip right here is always the pivot point. So again, you can hover in any corner that you want to. You just have to try and get that double-headed curvy arrow right there, and that's how you know that you're going to rotate. And again, scale can be done this way, or you can come up to Object, Transform, there's Scale, and you can tell it that you want it to be 80% of the original size that you had. Click OK, and it just shrank it just a bit. That is working with Object. The next thing I want to show you would be the layers. So if I click over here and you see it, I'm in the layers panel and it's got layer 1 right here. I'm going to click on this little arrow and you'll see it drops down. And what it does is it shows every shape that you've drawn, every line, every text, everything you've done in Illustrator is going to be laid out right here. So you can notice that right now I have this one highlighted, and over here there's a little blue square that indicates that it's selected. So I can do the same thing over here. I can actually select the other shape, and I can do that through the layers panel, or I could do it on the screen. Either way works. If I click the little eyeball, it hides one temporarily, but of course I could always reopen the eye. And if I click in the empty box next to the eye, it locks it. So I can't actually move or manipulate that shape at all if there's a lock symbol on it. The other interesting thing that happens, let me move this shape onto this one. Now you'll notice it went behind this shape. Layers is an order of operations. That means that you can manipulate what objects are on top of each other. So currently, if I click on this one, that indicates the smaller shape that's behind the larger shape. If I click and drag until I get a blue line and then let go, suddenly that shape is now on top of the other bigger shape. So again, just to kind of demonstrate, highlight in the layer panels which shape you want to manipulate, click and drag it to help do an order of operations. It's kind of like send to back, send to front, Microsoft Word, as well as PowerPoint. You can also name these paths. So if I want to, I double click where it says path and I can say large. And I can double click here and say small. And honestly, when you start working with really big projects, it's super important to label your layers. I can't stress that enough to you guys. Label all layers that you work with. It will make your time in Illustrator a lot easier when you can find the layer that you need to, because you could have 20, 50, 100. I've had projects that have had close to 1,000 layers in it, and if I didn't label, trying to find the shape that I want to work with over here is impossible. So please, please, please start naming your layers when you're working with them. And really, that's all I wanted to show you. I've shown you shapes, how to use text, how to use the brush, how to use lines and arcs, how to use the pan command and the zooming, how to arrange and reflect and copy and all that fun stuff. Once you know how to do that, you can do pretty much anything in Illustrator. Hello and welcome to the introduction video to Adobe Illustrator for interior designers. My name is JR. I'm going to be your guide through this amazing world that is Adobe Illustrator. Out of all the Adobe products, Illustrator is definitely my favorite, and I hope to show you some tricks that'll make it your favorite too. I also want to remind the viewing audience that this series teaches Illustrator in ways that interior design students may find handy. There are a lot of ways to go about using Illustrator. My methodology is what I'm going to be showing you in this series, so it may or may not be the best methodology for you. I'm a big promoter of finding what works best for you, so if mine doesn't work, there are, I'm sure, a lot of series out there that might work better for you. But I do try to break down Illustrator into easy to follow steps, so even if you're not an interior design student, you should still be able to follow along with ease and grace. Just remember, design software is not always the easiest to learn, so be kind to yourself through the learning process. And know that if you do feel frustrated at any point, then you are human. And everyone who has ever done anything great with design software has felt frustrated at some point. So you're really in good hands if you do. Well, let's get started, shall we? In this video, I'm going to introduce you to the interface of Illustrator, where to find things, how to kind of work your way through all the different areas on the screen. So the first thing that happens is you open Illustrator, and this is probably something that you see on your screen as well. Your first goal is to either create a new project or open a previous project. So over here on the left hand side you see two buttons, create new or open. You can also find this up in the main menu bar, which is what this is at the very top. Under file you should see that there's new and open as well. I'm just going to go ahead and click on the create new button since we haven't really opened or done anything previously in Illustrator. And what happens is this little window pops up. So this is kind of setting up what kind of document that you're going to be working on. So the first thing you want to do is check up at the very top. Are you working on a project for a mobile device? Is it for a website? Are you going to print it? Are you working film or video? Or are you doing art and illustration? Personally, I always choose print. Even if it's for any of the other things, it's just a real basic, easy thing to work with. So the first thing you're going to notice is that it says letter. So these are all the different types of documents that you can work with. It says letter, and it's in a measuring unit called points. Now, I'm an interior designer. I don't understand points. Graphic designers and people who illustrate all the time, they definitely understand that method of measurement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to the right side and I'm going to choose inches instead of points. Oh, that's so much better because now it's reading 8.5 by 11. Yes, it still reads points over here, but at least I can control like what kind of document that I'm working on. So 8.5 by 11 is a standard American size piece of paper that we work with, so I'm going to keep that. The next thing that you need to look at is, am I working in portrait or landscape? So you can decide which one that you want to work with. Artboards. So you're going to see when we open this document that there's going to be a background and then a white kind of canvas-like area that's where you're going to actually put the things that you create onto, and that's called an artboard. So for right now, I'm just going to do one, but there might come a time when you're doing a booklet or a pamphlet, or you're trying to create multiple sheets within the document. That is when you would use more than one artboard. Bleed has to do with the printing boundaries. I almost always leave it in zeros. And I think that's pretty much all we need to worry about. If we go to more settings, there is this thing called color mode, and it's where you can choose whether your document is CMYK or RGB. CMYK is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Those are the printing colors that like your inkjet or laserjet printers work with. So it's really great if you know that you're going to physically print a document. I would stick with CMYK. if you know that this is going to be a digital presentation project, it's going to be on a website or PowerPoint or something that's actually viewed on screens, then I would choose the RGB color mode. RGB stands for red, green, blue, which are the colors of light that make up your screen. So there's a little bit of trivia for you. I'm going to keep it at CMYK. Raster Effect, so this is 300 ppi. I just usually keep it there. It means pixels per inch, and the more you have, the better quality your photos. So 300 is a really great mode. And then preview mode, we can decide if we want. I honestly don't even know what those are, so I always keep it on default. And I'm going to go ahead and click Create Document, and it takes a second. And here it is. So like I said, what happens is you get this gray background, and then it's like a white piece of paper sitting on top of that gray background. So all the dimensions of the paper that we did in that little Create New Document window box is set up, and we now have an 8.5 by 11 size piece of paper. Any kind of art that you do in Illustrator is going to be done on the white paper, at least if you want it printed. Now you can, of course, always work in the gray area, but if you leave anything in the gray area, it will not print on the document. So that kind of helps you understand. I oftentimes work in the gray and then move it over to the white. It's totally up to you how you want to work it. So I already mentioned the menu bar up above, and this is where you go to save documents up in the file portion of the menu bar. You can print documents from here. In Illustrator, if you want to make a JPEG, a PNG, or a TIFF, you actually have to export it out of Illustrator. In Photoshop, you actually save as, and you can turn it into a JPEG that way. So there's a little bit of a difference between Illustrator and Photoshop in that sense. So just remember, if you want to create a picture file, you always export it, and you always export as. Edit is where you go to copy and paste. You can kind of work with a few different things in Edit. Object is where you can decide like how to transform it, if you need to scale it, rotate it, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of different commands throughout this whole menu bar. I'm not going to go through all of them. Effect is really fun because you can work with Photoshop effects. You can also stylize, rasterize. Oh my gosh, this is so much terminology that you don't know yet. It's okay, we're going to get you through it. And then of course window. So this is a really great thing to show you if you need to turn on an extra panel that hosts a whole lot of tools, different types of tools that you want to work with. This is what you do. So for instance, if I wanted to open the brush panel, you can see that it opened up a little window. Essentially is what a panel is, but it hosts a whole lot of different tools that you can use to create the lines and shapes that you want to create. I'm just going to simply click close just to close that panel, and I can always reopen it by going back to the window. Right underneath the main menu bar is the what I call the options bar. So anytime that you're working with a command, this option bar can change to give you different parameters that you can work with. So for instance, if I were going to choose type tool over here, you'll see that this kind of updates with all the different things that I can do when I go to add text to a document. So font, and is it going to be bold or regular? Is it going to be 12 point in size? Is it going to be 52 points in size? Is it left justified, center justified? All that kind of thing. And then if I choose a shape, you'll see how that also changes. So the options bar usually changes only when you have a command active or a tool active that allows you to change parameters of what's happening. So I already kind of pointed this out. This is your main toolbar, and this is where you're going to go to do most of your work in Illustrator. So things like clicking on objects, selecting objects, the type tool, the shape tool, all of these things, how to change the color and the border color are really great These are really important tools for you to know, and it's always good to have this toolbar out and in the open. I always keep it right where Illustrator defaults it to, and that is your main toolbar. Over on the right hand side, you're going to see that there are already some pre-chosen panels for you. The one I want to pay most attention to is the layers panel. Layers is a whole other video. It's a very dynamic way of organizing your drawings. It's a little different than anything that you've ever seen before, but once you understand it, it makes a lot of sense and it makes working with Illustrator a lot easier. So in a nutshell, this is Adobe Illustrator. The interface, I kind of showed you where to find a few things. In the next video series, I am going to show you how to work with some of the tools that you saw on the left-hand side of your screen.